Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Jobology podcast. I'm your host, Brandon, and today my guest is a friend of mine that I've known since high school. His name is Richie, and he is the athletic trainer and health services coordinator for a high school in San Diego. He's going to talk to us all about the challenges that he faces dealing with an entire school's well-being, as well as give some advice to parents for when their kid's injured and they might not think so. So without further ado, Richie. Welcome, Richie.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me on. Honored.
Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. I kind of just, mentioned that, your title is health services coordinator. I know that there's more that goes into it than just that. And from our pre kind of interview talk, I know that you wear multiple hats at the school. So before we kind of get into exactly what we're going to be talking about, how, if you were at a party or hanging out or meeting somebody that you hadn't met in a while and they're like, hey, what do you do for work? How would you answer that versus like, what's the official title on your business card?
I identify as mostly an athletic trainer. So when they ask me what I do, it's athletic health care. But yeah, you're right. High school athletic trainers especially wear a million hats around the campus and are always solving a million problems just because of either staffing issues or budget issues and stuff like that. I'd say the elevator speech. Hey, those guys that run out onto the field when someone gets hurt in the NFL or in MLB. Yeah, that's me, basically. So we get our little time to shine right there.
Yeah, right. The spotlight's on you for the minute,
and that's about as much as I ever want, ever. But it's all the stuff that happens behind the scenes with injury evaluation, injury management, acute care, and then getting kids back to the field and the rehab that takes place there. And the player safety obviously is our number one priority.
Nice. So like head athletic trainer, is that what you would say is your official title, or do you have like a more?
Yeah, that's what I went to school for. The only reason why the health services coordinator is added is strictly because of Saints and the position there for this high school. A lot of other high schools, whether public or private, have their own separate position for like the school nurse or the health services coordinator that follows all those same job duties there, but they have a different person doing it.
Gotcha. I was thinking when you mentioned like, hey, that's all I wanted. That's about as much as I want you guys to see me is that quick little run out and back. It's almost like the best way to do your job is to almost not have to do it. Like if you don't have to do anything, you're like, hey, it was a successful day. I didn't have to do anything.
You have a parent meeting and you say, hi, this is what I do. I hope I don't see you.
Exactly.
Your son or daughter is going to be a lot healthier probably.
Right. Yeah. If we're seeing each other all the time, there's probably an issue going on.
Yeah,
okay. And then you also teach, correct, too, as part of.
Yeah. And then again, that's the same thing with this job at Saints. It's part of the job role as being one of the faculty members. Thankfully, I get to teach anatomy and sports medicine. It's one combined class. So it's in my wheelhouse. I'm very, hopefully qualified to be able to teach that subject, very natural subject for me.
That'd be wild if they threw you into like something else and you're like, oh, you're teaching French now. And you're like, I don't know French. What?
Right. And so again, at other schools, they do have a lot of opportunities for athletic trainers to teach, whether that's through some of the federal programs, and it's always sports medicine. So there are a lot of athletic trainers at the high school level that teach and are the athletic trainer. I'm lucky enough, man, I do all three. I get to be school nurse, kind of help with health services along with athletic training with the athletes, and still see the students who aren't always necessarily athletes either, but are interested in the healthcare field, the education side. So that's what's been really, enticing about the Saints role.
Gotcha. So it could be somebody that's like, hey, I'm not an athlete necessarily, but I'm a fan of sports and a fan of medicine. This is where my worlds combined. Okay.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, there's kids that are, and even I know since Saints has had this program, I think they had it back when we were at Saints, because I took it. There's kids that have gone on to become physical therapists and chiropractors, and they all took that class too. So there's been some good kids to join the medical community having taken that class.
After getting their like toes dipped in it.
You gain interest, you get that base knowledge. That way, when you get to college, it is a college prep program. And that you start taking anatomy in the college level, and it's not just like a train wreck. You get to actually you have some experience in that subject already.
I like that. That's solid. Um, I before we get into kind of the whole what you do, what's your day to day look like and the whole everything, I think something that's massively important to kind of understanding the whole journey is starting at the why. So why get into sports medicine? Why get into, athletic training? What kind of was your inspiration, I guess?
I mean, as like a kid, I even knew I kind of wanted to be some type of role around sports. So the passion of sports is what drew me into it initially. And as a kid, you're always thinking you're going to be a pro athlete and you're going to be a baseball player. This was my dream as a kid. Pitch
Yeah.
in the World Series, whatever, right? Like that's every kid's
Yeah.
dream. And as you get older, that reality starts to check itself a little bit.
Right. You start to realize like, oh, wait a second. This is not you playing your first like game against actual athletes and you're like, hey, this is a lot faster than I thought it was.
Yeah. And that happened. That happened pretty quick. But in high school, I still loved sports. I was still an athlete, always playing. But I knew that there was probably going to be a time where I needed to find some type of role that wasn't going to, I knew I already wasn't going to be a college athlete, even. I didn't have that skill there, that opportunity really. And so taking the class at Saints actually was a big part of it. Seeing what athletic trainers do, seeing the curriculum or what's kind of involved. And so I always was good at science as well. So I had the passions. I had science and I had sports that I liked. And I think the human body came a little more naturally to me. I didn't do so well in some subjects like chemistry and some of those subjects where it's too small. You have to picture it. There's all these models, and I didn't do well with that. Whereas the body's right in front of you. You can move it, you can stretch it, you can do stress tests, all that sort of stuff. So it did come a little bit more naturally to me. But I think from the beginning was the passion to be around sports, to be around athletes, and maybe my personality as well. I've always just been kind of a caring, empathetic guy, and
Yeah,
being able to help athletes that are out there and being around it just made a lot of sense to me. Yeah.
that makes sense. Something I was thinking about kind of as you were saying that is I could never do what you do only because the sight of a turned ankle literally makes my stomach spin in knots. Like, is that something you had to overcome, or is that something that just wasn't ever naturally there for you?
Smells do it for me. So if someone's puking, I think it's maybe just innate where we
Yeah,
have
yeah,
that
yeah.
reflex.
Uh-huh.
But blood and a lot of gross bodily fluids and stuff like that doesn't for me.
Hmm. It has it ever? Like it never did?
Really, I mean, there is a bit of sensitivity. So you start studying these textbooks and you start looking at these types of pathologies or injuries, and you're going to be exposed to it, not to mention on any of your clinical rotations and internships and that.
Desensitized to it almost.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah. Because again, and also your training comes in that moment. And that happens a lot in athletic training where you have to care for this person. So you can't be the one that's, oh, this sucks. This is gross. Like you're here to help this person. And then that takes over a little bit. So you kind of, again, you just shut it out for a bit. And then you look back.
Yeah, like the adrenaline of the situation, like, hey, I don't have time to worry about, there's something else going on more pressing
Kind of,
right
you
now.
have to react. You have to
Mhm.
act. Um,
Okay.
Take that kind of like pause, gross feeling out of it. You don't even think about it. Like, yeah, it's pretty gross, but it's not going to be like, stop. Yeah.
Yeah, that was always something that was curious to me about like surgeons, doc. Like, is that something you overcame, or is it just, hey, I never really naturally had it? So it's interesting to know, like, it never really bothered me, and then you kind of desensitize yourself to it over time, and so now it's like, yeah,
Sure. And it's just sports. So those injuries, like the really grotesque ones, are pretty infrequent. Um, if you're a surgeon, yeah, you got to deal with that every day. That's a lot worse. Or you have trauma, ER doctors. That I even have a lot of, admiration for those people because we have some obviously 911 calls or some
hmm,
emergency situations, some pretty grotesque things, but doing that on a daily basis would get to me, I think, too. So we do need our time to kind of decompress, and those high stress, high leverage situations don't come around frequently, and we train for them. And then when they happen, and you have time away from that, but having to do that all the time would still be pretty tough.
yeah. It's like if every game there was something happened, that would be wild.
Right. Yeah. No, that would be tough. Or like ambulance, right? Like ambulance crews and EMS. It's like you are only going to emergency. And that would be way too much stress for me. I don't think I'd be too interested in that.
I could not do that. That's I chose a very light, low stress path of talking to people for a living. So no.
The stress is there, just not maybe constant. So yeah, or you go in, you handle it
It's no
as
life or death. No one's gonna die if I don't ask the right question. All right.
sure,
So
sure.
I think we'll be okay.
Yeah.
Um when you are so I'm assuming this is something that after high school and you get introduced to sports medicine, it's something you end up going to college for, finishing college, I'm assuming. I could be wrong. And then how do you get into like working for the schools or working as a athletic trainer?
It varies by state. There's different statewide regulations. Some states have licensure where you become a licensed athletic trainer. Some states have just their certification where you just need to be a certified, you pass a board exam to become certified. And the only state without any regulation is California, which is very unfortunate right now. But no matter what, yes, if you want to become a certified athletic trainer, which even in California, I say that yes, we are not regulated, but most jobs or schools or things like that have enough sense to hire certified athletic trainers because of our training and because we go to college, we take these classes, we graduate with a degree, and then we have passed a board certification exam.
That makes sense. Well, and it's like if I have two people and one has the certification and one doesn't, I think I'm just going to take the person that does.
So with my path, at least, and it has changed now too. So the whole entire profession of athletic training has gone through a bit of a transition.
Okay.
I went and was able to get my bachelor's in athletic training from Cal State Long Beach. And then I chose to go on and also get a master's degree just because of continuing education, kind of where I was at with my career. I was interested in maybe going to a higher level of education to work in that setting. But at the bare minimum, you need to have that degree from an accredited program, and then you're qualified to go on to take a board exam to become certified.
How was that exam?
That was the most stressful exam of my life. Yeah, it's make or break, right? You're like, hey, I'm
Yeah, dude.
4 years into this, and I have to pass this. Granted, you can retake it if you don't pass, but you don't want to be that guy that doesn't pass the first time. So the whole entire pressure of your career is on at that time.
So no big.
Uh,
It's
yeah.
just
But
whatever.
recently, probably within the last 5 years now, the entire profession, it was decided to become entry level masters. So, in order to take your board of certification exam, kind of like what physical therapists did recently, where they went from entry level masters to a doctorate program,
Oh,
athletic training has gone from bachelor's to a master's. So, at this point, students need to go and complete and get their bachelor's degree in a related field, let's say exercise science or biology or something like that. And then they can go on and get accepted into a program, a master's degree program for that 2 year athletic training program.
gotcha. Okay.
And then, yeah. And then from there, you should become certified, take your BOC. It's called the Board of Certification exam to
Mhm.
become a certified athletic trainer. And that's the credential that I carry, the ATC.
Okay, cool. And then for getting like actually getting a job in a school, is it like you just apply? Is it, hey, I just send my resume to emails, or is it like I knew somebody, then they got me in?
That can always apply to it. But there are a few very specific models, at least the high school level. Um, Sometimes it's let's say like a private doctor's office. Sometimes they are the employers. So they make a contract with the school district or the school to say, hey, we're going to hire the athletic trainer. You're going to pay us, and then we pay the athletic trainer. So it's kind of this third party.
Almost like a like staffing agency, but for athletic
Yeah, pretty
trainers.
much, right? But you
Okay.
trust the doctor's office. Sometimes hospital systems employ athletic trainers as well. So the hospital system is close to the school district, and they come in and they say, "Hey, we will hire the athletic trainers for the schools and pay them through the district pays the hospital system. The hospital system hires and pays the athletic trainers." Some are just direct hire. So that's how my contract is. But I've worked with both. So my previous job with Torrey Pines High School was through a hospital setting, and the hospital setting is who employed me. It was UCSD.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't think of it that way. I would just figure if you work for a school, you must be employed by the school, but that makes sense.
Also, there's an even different model too. You could be employed by the district. So you're a district employee as the athletic trainer for that school.
Gotcha.
Yeah. The college setting, I'm not sure if it still follows that same model, but there are certain clinics or probably hospital settings that are with either junior college or D1 or any of those. But I would imagine that most of when you get to that college level, it's hired by the college itself. And the same with the pros or anything like that.
That's yeah, hired by the team as their personal. Gotcha.
Correct.
Okay.
Mhm.
Interesting. So now that we've got the job, we're gonna just stick with Saints for right now, just to make it easy. So now that we've got the job, we're working at Saints. What does your average day look like? So this is something that's always fascinated me with people is I think that a lot of people feel like they know what people do, but have actually no idea when asked or pressed. Like, okay, cool. Well, what does that person? They're like, actually, I don't know. So what does your average day look like? What time does school start? What time do you have to get there? What kind of time are you done? What does an average day for Richie look like?
School starts 7:45, and so because of my teaching role and position, um, I don't have any of the early blocks. So the mornings are my prep periods, my time to get a lot of stuff done. So that's when I really kind of lock into emails. I lock into any things I need to grade, any communication that needs to take place, any lesson planning that needs to take place, any supply orders or things like that, or things around the training room that need to be cleaned or fixed or things like that.
Jeez. That's just the morning.
That's just the morning is settling in.
That's just settling in. Like that's what I've also found when people start to tell me what their average. I'm like, dude, you guys do so much stuff in one day. I don't know how people get all this done.
It seems like a lot until you get into a routine of it. You're always writing medical notes on injuries. So if you haven't caught up on that the night before, you're documenting all the injuries. You're also available or I am at the morning time for any students that are getting hurt or sick or anything like that. So if they need to come to the nurse, the athletic training, the health services office for that, I'm available for that. So here for the whole school day.
Wow.
And it seems like a lot, but it kind of just flows into a routine where you handle the more you prep and set up your day, the easier it is. So as long as you're effective in that morning time, that usually helps your day a lot.
That can kind of like set your afternoon up so it's a little bit easier. But if you slacked off in the morning, then you got to play catch up in the afternoon.
You don't want to let it back up too much. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Staying on top of things is super important because communication is such a big part of this job. So that communication could be following up with a parent. Did that kid go get an x-ray? Following up with the coach. Hey, you're not going to have this kid today, or he's doing this. So communication's huge. And then that's kind of the morning time until I teach my first block. And we do have a block schedule 1 through 6 on Mondays. And then I'll only teach one class Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So I'll teach my class, get them in. The class is a lot of hands-on. So we do a lot of lab work.
I was going to ask about that because I never took, as we were talking about, we went, me and Richie went to the same high school, but I never took any kind of sports medicine. So I was curious, like, are you guys like mannequins, books, like what models?
Above, man. Yeah, we dive into a sports medicine essentials book, and that covers everything from careers to legal to injuries to emergency preparedness, all that. I'm also Red Cross certified to teach CPR, AED, and first aid. So all the kids in the class become certified and they get their first aid, CPR, and AED certification through my class.
That's good.
So that's a big part of the class as well, as just emergency action.
Yeah.
So teach that class.
Do you have to write, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but do you have to write like, let's say I'm playing and I, break my ankle in a game. Do you write my like rehab plan?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow. Geez.
We're with these athletes the whole entire step of the way. We're the ones that are out there to evaluate it. to manage it, to make sure that we're making the right calls, whether this thing needs to go in an ambulance or we can just splint it, brace it. How, and the education side, especially for high school kids, this could be their first major injury. So we are making sure they're doing the right things.
Yeah, how to rehab properly.
Yeah, or which doctor to see. Hey, this needs to go to urgent care or the ER like now, versus hey, let's schedule in a doctor's appointment. They can follow up with an ortho. And then once we have a great diagnosis and a plan of care, then under the direction of the physicians, then we can, write the rehab, the reconditioning protocol. They can come in and do their treatment here. Thankfully, we have, phenomenal facilities here at Saints to conduct all of these rehabs. And then again, those last steps where we're starting kind of return to play,
Yeah.
end of rehab protocols, we get them out there, we start to recondition. That's when the taping or the bracing comes into play, and we facilitate those as well before they're cleared to return from their doctor if they went and saw the doctor, obviously. But that in between time is where we really take over and provide the care for them.
Nice. Okay, so sorry for my interruption. Now we're at lunch because apparently, we didn't get enough done during the morning. So, geez Louise.
That's my morning. I either teach a class right before or right after lunch.
Okay. Do you prefer that or no?
I love the end of the day. Yeah. Because again, I don't want to have to wake up after a long night, or let's say it's, football game the day before or whatever, basketball game, or any sports game. You have later nights sometimes. So teaching later is better. Gives me a little prep time.
Okay.
Also too, if there's like absolutely nothing going on, there's no real need to be there right at 7:45 on some days. It's it does fluctuate a bit.
Gotcha.
Teaching's done. That's usually the end of school. And so that's when it gets the busiest. So again,
the busiest is not, we haven't even got the busiest yet. Oh my golly.
Prep time, teaching, that's just your day. That's the passion. Everything comes out, you have fun. At 2:00, they have about half an hour window before practices start. So you're going to get kids in that are warming up, prepping tissue, getting their ankles, knees, shoulders, hips, everything right. Taping, getting the field set up, make sure they have water out there. Quick re-evals maybe from the day before. Where's this kid at? Has he progressed? Is he ready for contact or no contact, or how we're doing?
Gotcha.
On top of, so all those things happen, maybe 10, 15 kids or so in like a half an hour window. Going forward. Also, I kind of forgot to mention, sometimes at lunch, it helps my day too, that kids can come in at lunchtime. So that's a great time where I can offload my afternoon by saying, come in at lunch, let's reevaluate it. Let's get a good plan for the day.
Yeah.
Before, I'm trying to get the kids that are practicing and going out there to the practice handled and set. Kids that aren't necessarily going to practice, we can get them eval a little earlier in the day. So
Gotcha.
Prepping that side. After school, again, that mad rush happens. Kids are coming in, rehabbing, doing their exercise plan. So that's where the preparation comes in. If you wrote that entire plan, you hand it to them. Hey, ask me if you have any questions. Let's go do these exercises.
Get to work. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And that's huge. And that's a lot where the standard of care can stay really high, but there's only one of me, or maybe I have an intern or a student who's not going to be doing a lot of the same stuff. So at the pro levels, you have a staff of 10.
You have a whole team. Yeah, of course.
So all those 10 can do some soft tissue work or manual therapy, or they don't mind sitting there with a little ultrasound to heat up a body part. But if I do that for 10 to 15 minutes, I just lost half my time, and I have 10 kids that I wasn't even looking at or doing anything with. So time management, communication, preparation is really important for the job. And then at the high school level, and with a lot of my kind of additional certifications of movements and things like that and exercises, I get the kids movement, right? Movement is medicine. If we can exercise that body part, that's going to be better than them sitting passively on a treatment table with a heat pack on their leg.
Atrophying. Yeah.
So the more I can write programs, the better. And they get moving. I can see more kids and keep an eye on them. To get them back onto the field. And so that's the busiest part. Then we go to the practice. So this is where the acute care happens.
Okay.
Let's say someone gets hurt at practice, we're out there. It's also a great time, we're communicating with the coaches, we're looking for injuries or anything that we see. And that's kind of that first responder role. Is it bad? Is it, depending on the severity? And that takes over at the actual practices or games, depending on what's going on campus.
What's the schedule that day? Yeah.
Yep. And then I don't know. We don't have lights here at Saints, so that's a blessing, right? We have lights. We're going till like 8 or 9 at night. No, I don't think I could
No.
survive that schedule. So once the sun sets, we're out of here, right? We end about 5:36.
And then do you get to cut right home, or do you go back to your office and more stuff? What do you?
Things that are pressing and need to be taken care of, get taken care of. But again, I know the next day I'm going to have my morning prep period, so I can do my documentation. The next day, I'm not going to forget what the injury was or what tests I did, and so that's kind of where that experience and time management comes into play of, all right, let's write that note. Tomorrow, we'll get in contact with parents initially and then follow up tomorrow. Things like that. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
I do, when it's done, I try and cut out.
That's something I was gonna we try and find out too, is like a work-life balance. Like once you're done, are you done and they don't mess with you, or is it, hey, once you're done, there might be 50 calls you still got to answer out from home?
Not necessarily calls like that, but just being a decent human being, right? Like you have these kids that get really injured. So if there was something that happened, I'm always going to have my cell phone available to the parents if they need to talk, or I'm going to be the one that follows up and make sure that they're okay. They could be sitting in an ER hospital waiting room for the next 3 hours if I sent them in an ambulance or something like that. So those types of deals are where you care about the kids too. You see them all the time. And so, besides that, there's not a lot of work that I would take home with.
No, but like no one from like faculty or like the principal's not hitting you up like, hey, where's this, or what's this, or what, you're pretty much.
No, maybe a text with a coach a little bit. Hey, we saw this or whatever, but nothing besides communication on that
Okay.
end, like job duties.
Gotcha. And it's nothing like the other thing. It's not that you're forced to do it. You're doing it because you're choosing to do it. You know what I mean? Like, okay.
Right. It's usually on the severe cases, right? If the kid has like a little bruise on his arm, and we're not calling home for that or anything.
No, you'll be fine. I'll see you tomorrow. Yeah.
Correct.
So now that we've kind of completed our day, we get to go do the whole thing again tomorrow.
Oh yeah.
Jeez.
Sometimes Saturdays.
No. Is there any advice you would have for a new employee who is stepping into your role?
This is a heavily involved relationship job between those you work with, your colleagues, the coaches that you're with, and then most importantly, the students or your patients, the athletes. So that's the most critical part. So if you're not investing into those relationships to make them better, to be the camaraderie between the faculty and your colleagues and your superiors there, the coaches as well, the trust that goes along with it. And then being at a high school is you're trying to develop the best men in this situation that you can too. So
yeah,
the love for these kids and the relationships and the outcomes that you want for these kids has got to be the most important part. So always revert back to that. It doesn't matter what kind of day you're having or anything like that. If you look back and you're like, what can I do to make this kid have a better day, have a better life, have better outcomes in whatever area it is, like that's all I need. That's what I do it for. So
just so everybody's aware, also Saints is an all boys Catholic high school. It's not, Richie's not saying, hey, make better men and we don't, I don't talk to the women. No, it's only men that he's dealing with. So I don't want to, save the comments. It's okay.
But I mean, same go for any other high school, right? Like it's always still about the kids.
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, I mean, they're the ones that, without them, you have no job.
Reverting back to doing everything what we say at Saints is doing everything out of love for the kids. So yeah, it might be a discipline, or it might be something that's more stern, or hey, we got to fix this, or having a hard discussion. But if it's coming from a place of love for that kid to get them to a better spot, that's what it's for. So stick to those relationships.
I like that. Looking back on your own personal path, is there anything you would change along your own personal path to either make something easier or maybe, I don't know, learn something different? I don't, is there something that you might change for your own?
I've always been pretty self-motivated.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, there was always different career options I could have chosen. I think I would have had maybe just as much fun, just as much success at whatever level. And that was kind of why, going back to the master's degree, I was thinking of going into that college setting. It just happened that the Saints position, and even before that, the Torrey Pines position was available. And I took it as kind of my first job. And I didn't know that I would love the high school level as much as I did and how much fun I was having there. Um, but I think if I would have taken that master's degree to, maybe tried it out, see how the college setting was, or try to work your way and grind it up to that pro level. Um, I just never really maybe had that full ambition for it, where I knew I was doing the career I loved and I found myself in an awesome situation with great people to work with and great athletics around me. So I was really happy with how that worked out.
Nice.
Um, and I still look at it from a standpoint of not so much what I haven't done yet or what I have done differently, but just to continue to kind of keep those same mindset of, there's still so much to be done. So not getting stagnant, trying to always continue to learn, especially in this field. It's so important to stay on the top of research, stay on the top of
Stay on top of the new and like what's
emerging treatments, emerging therapies, emerging philosophies. In our time, I mean, it's just incredible what we've learned since we were in high school about concussions, what we've learned about tendon injuries, what we've learned about rehab protocols and what certain techniques work, and the studies they've done on which exercises are best for which muscle, or which strength protocols are best to develop strength, or new modalities have been created with like blood flow restriction, and all these different things are always emerging. Just the medical field is always this year to year change. And so that's where the intensity always lies, is be sure that because you're going to have kids asking about it too, or you may have to protect kids that aren't using it in the right way. So if you're not necessarily the expert, but if you don't know about it, you're going to be giving the wrong advice to somebody potentially, or you're not going to be maximizing your treatments for these kids. So I would say that not necessarily doing too much different, but kind of continue to evolve is what's going to take the most effort year in, year out.
that make I yeah, I think that's something everyone can apply to every job. Is like, hey, always stay up to date, always have an idea of what's going on, be willing to change, be willing to adapt, be willing to
Yeah,
evolve.
we adapt a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially from even just day to day with schedule changes or
Oh yeah.
kid changes, whatever. Yeah. Hmm.
Um, we have a next segment here of job specific questions. These are some questions that I came up that I think are more geared to your job specifically. If they aren't and don't play, totally okay. You could be like, hey, that doesn't play. Bad question. All right, we'll move on. Speaking of kind of emerging technologies, emerging treatments, stuff like that, the scale of pain seems very outdated to me. Like, what's your scale 1 to 10? This seems so outdated. In your opinion, what's the best way to determine pain?
We're still learning about what pain is.
Sure.
I mean, we do know, here's what we know, it's subjective, which is why there's a pain scale. And it's funny you say that because I still ask that every single day.
Okay, so it's not outdated. It's still
Every day
I
it's
just
like,
figured like we gotta have
how
something
bad
better
is
by
it?
now.
Right? How bad is it? And
Yeah, a
so
5. Yeah, like, okay, well, what's 5 to you? That's, I don't know. It's always seemed like, again, like you said, so subjective.
pain is a tool in the toolkit. So again, you're not going, if a freshman, I'll just say freshman, said, oh, it's a 9 out of 10, and they're screaming, it's subjective, right? So am I going to automatically call 911? No. It's a tool in the toolkit. Hey, in that kid, in that situation with that injury, is experiencing a 9 out of 10 pain. So, hey, maybe that clues you in. All right, this might be something pretty bad. Um, Or that's great, right? We try and keep, there's so many different pain terminologies too that we talk about with
That's true.
injuries.
Yeah.
I like describing, like, hey, describe the pain. And you get burning, stinging, stabbing, blunt, soreness, right? Like the a million different
Yeah.
adjectives. But that's important to our job too, because we need to know
Is it a burning sensation? Is it a tightening sensation? Like what is happening? Yeah.
tingling, right? So these are huge tools in our toolkit, I would say. Nothing's gonna, I mean, sometimes it will change the way you go about it. If you have a kid on the field and he says that there's numbness and he can't feel his arm, right? Like, okay, yeah, it changes from non-emergency to now an emergency. Um, but the pain scale itself too, um, as rehab goes along, right, it could be a great tool to make progress. So, hey, they were a 6 or a 7, and now we check in. It doesn't matter what that 3 is, but if they went down to a 3, we know that's less. And so we are making progress. So we are getting them out of pain. So using it as an outcome measure.
I like that better. Yeah. I like that. Hey, I was at a 10. Now I'm at an 8. Now I'm at a 5. Okay. So something's working. Like whatever we're doing is working. Okay.
Sometimes it doesn't matter what's working, just use it. Right. It
That's
doesn't
true.
have to be proven all the time. Hey,
Yeah.
slap an ice pack on it and that made
hmm
it better. All right, we'll take that
We'll
win.
take it.
We should
Yep.
be doing more than just that. But
And I mean, also on the flip side of like, hey, it was a 5, but now it's a 7. Now it's an 8. Now it's like okay, if something's not going right, we got to change course. Yeah.
always just, it's still, take it for what it is. It's subjective. You rarely make a lot of decisions based on just that number, but that number in context means a lot.
Gotcha. Next question I have here is when you're dealing with the health and well-being of an entire school, what are the biggest challenges you face?
So there's a lot of admin work. I'm very, very lucky to have our athletic secretary that helps me out a lot. So when we have, and we're not even a huge school by any standard,
Yeah,
we are at about 735 kids.
that's still 735 people you're
There's still a
responsible
lot of
for.
kids. That's true.
Jeez.
There's a lot of kids. But I mean, in perspective to like a public school of 2,000 to 4,000, that's smaller. So that busy work definitely loads up, especially a lot of front end work on the seasons, because we are responsible for the physicals and making sure that they have all their paperwork and their athletic clearances and they're allowed to be out there, and kind of that babysitting clearance management type role, which we know is so important, right? We got to make
Like
sure
the
that
logistical side of it.
Mhm. Preventing liability just from having all that paperwork turned in. That's where it loads up a lot. So I do have my athletic secretary that helps me tremendously filing it and reviewing it, make sure everything's there. So the busy work, and even with teaching too, um, that's where it kind of stacks up, is just kind of some busy work. So formulating, using technology, we make a lot of different spreadsheets for everything, just to help organize, to help sort, to help dates and all that stuff. So using technology is huge. Sending reminders, things like that, is where it really stacks up. And again, it comes down to volume, the number of kids, right? I think that's kind of the toughest part. But the actual day-to-day responsibilities all the time are pretty minor, right? Like not everyone's getting hurt at a school every day until flag football intramurals or something.
Right. Yeah. Until dodgeball happens and then
Dodgeball, right?
yeah. You had mentioned earlier that you worked previously at a different high school. Um, what is the biggest differences and similarities besides there is a very obvious one you guys will hear here soon when I finish this question. What is the biggest differences and similarities between working at an all boys school versus working at a co-ed campus?
Man, I mean, knowing how unique Saints is, I don't think there's any school that's anywhere close to the experience that these kids get at Saints. Honestly, it's so sweet.
I mean, I guess like double the kids is kind of a massive,
Yeah,
like,
and
massive
faithfully, right?
issue.
So I wouldn't have been able, if I was when I was at Torrey Pines, I wouldn't have been able to do all the roles that I do at Saints because
Gotcha.
of the numbers.
You'd be strictly stuck to like just
And I
Hell
was,
yeah.
I was just the athletic trainer because I mean, you look at our fall schedule with Saints, we have three sports: football. So that's three teams right there, freshman, JV, varsity. We got beach volleyball now is a CIF sport,
Oh wow, that's cool.
a JV and varsity cross country team. And this is just fall season because we're in fall right now. At Torrey Pines, we would have our cheerleading team. We have our football team still.
Oh yeah, I didn't
We
think
have
about all this.
JV and varsity field hockey. We
Hmm.
have freshman JV and varsity girls volleyball. We have JV and varsity boys and girls cross country. We'd have girls tennis. We'd have, I think that's about it. I can't, water polo. I take that back. So there's also water polo. And this is just the fall. So the massive more amount of athletes. So the biggest change is like my job there was on a golf cart, and I was like making rounds around the campus, checking in on field hockey, checking in on volleyball, checking in on tennis, right? Whatever's going on.
That like that time you were talking about of like, yeah, I have like the 10 to 15 minutes to deal with 10 kids or whatever. This now is like 10 to 15 minutes to deal with 100 kids.
It was solely focused on athletic training, and you had to be so hyper prepared to get through those days. But again, all you had to worry about was the athletes as an athletic trainer. So
Do you have multiple trainers when you have that many people? Like it feels like that's impossible for one person to do.
there should be, I
There should
think in
be.
our lifetime, we are going to get to a world where there are multiple athletic trainers at each high school, and that's how it should be.
Yeah.
Because it comes down to care versus coverage at a lot of the times, right? Like if you have three games going on campus, you cannot cover and have great athletic training coverage for all those events. You're kind of just, I'm sorry, but you're covering all these. So
Right. It's like the quality versus quantity argument.
quality of care goes
Yeah.
down with the more patients you have. So
Yeah.
that was a big difference. The amount of athletes, like you talked about with females, the only difference I would say is just from a liability standpoint, kind of protecting myself. There would always be, a friend there during an evaluation, and your communication needs to be very, very on point to make sure that they're aware of what's going on, what you're doing, what they should feel, or what is happening during that evaluation, making sure they're always checking in. This is okay. Are you comfortable? Right. Like things like that just kind of come along with those types of scenarios. But
As that should be something though that it, again is like, hey, that's just for everyone. Like, it's wild that it's like, yeah, you gotta.
open door policies, right? Things like that.
Okay, gotcha.
So that's probably the biggest difference. But then with Saints too is like just the difference of responsibilities of teaching, of the health services role is the difference.
The different hats. Gotcha. Okay. We kind of mentioned this earlier a little bit, but from me myself playing sports growing up, I know that practice isn't always the most enjoyable thing in the world, especially for me. Uh, how do you know? And I'm not going to put it out there. I'll say that I know this can happen because I might have done this once or twice in my life. How do you know when a kid is playing up an injury versus actually hurt?
Taking it, man. It goes back to, well, I'd start and preface this with saying that's not my job to diagnose a faking injury.
Sure. If you're telling me you're hurt, then you're hurt. Yeah.
The amount of liability you're going to put yourself out if you're trying to call out fakes and you're not treating something, or you're, oh, push through it, right? Like
You're fine. You're fine. Yeah.
that's a risky road to go down anyways. So, that might be more on the coach and the coaches to create a culture that they, have relationships with their kids. And that was my second part of the answer, is the relationship. So how well these kids goes a long way. You start to notice trends maybe, or you start to notice their effort or that sort of
It's like,
thing.
wow, you get hurt every Monday. Every Monday, your knee is, yeah.
Right.
And it seems to be happening every time we run laps. That's the time that your knee starts to flare up. Interesting. Okay.
I would say a coach's kind of mentality and their culture around their program probably is the biggest contributor to preventing that.
If you create a culture of slacking off, you're going to
It
get
could happen.
people that slack off. Yeah, of course.
And then educating the kids too. Like, hey, this is something you're kind of hurting, but let's see if it's okay, right? Let's try and run. Make them kind of double down on this, or or you give them an exercise, and you're like, well, you're not just gonna do nothing. Like, we're gonna be here. We're not gonna just waste your time. So let's do this, this, and this. And if they hate that, they may just be
Like,
better.
oh, it feels better.
They're
Yeah.
not
Oh,
torturing
better.
them, but like put them through some exercises and
Sure.
uh, make them do some cardio on the bike for the rest of practice or something like that, depending on the sport. Uh, but it happens, right? They're kids, they're growing.
Of course.
But that's not the end of my world. If they fake it, they're out. It doesn't bother me too much.
Nice. As someone who spent a lot of time in disciplinary situations, how many detentions or referrals have you had to give out in one day?
I'm actually really relaxed on this.
Oh,
Don't tell John O'Byrne.
oh.
So I have a policy in my class. I created it out of the blue where I started giving kids strikes because I'm able to manage my classroom and I know everyone has their own strategy for that.
Sure.
But if they're boys too, right? They're immature.
Yeah. And that's the other thing people need to keep in mind. There's no girls to keep everything kind of like, oh, we need to be cool because it's all boys all the time.
Immaturity is like the
Yeah.
baseline most times, right?
Yeah.
And so you gotta expect it. Again, there's a line, but I usually use the 3-strike policy. So I'll give kids strikes. And by that time they hit that second strike, like they know, like, hey, dude, you're disruptive a little bit, like do it again. I'll give you a detention. And that's actually worked a lot better than just handing out detentions. I've had kids that have been a little too loud, mouthing off, saying stupid things. And then that second strike happens and like they're locked in for the rest of the class. So I do have pretty good success there.
I like that idea. That would have been maybe better for me too, instead of the first automatic, Brandon, you're talking, here's detention. Like, just give me one time. Give me
Yeah,
a
exactly.
chance.
Like, hey, at least you're aware now. Hey, that's messing me up. I don't like that. And again, also setting policies early on so that they're aware of it. Granted, we got to follow the handbook, so I'm going to enforce on the school's rules and
Yeah.
things like that.
If
Dress
somebody's
codes,
cheating, you have to, yeah, I
eating.
gotta
Oh
write a
my
referral.
gosh!
I don't have a choice. Yeah.
And just from my own personal beliefs and everything there, like that has to be enforced. But maybe not so much. I mean, egregious things, yes, we will hand out some detentions, but I haven't had that. Kids are usually pretty calm. I also attribute that to my like teaching style. You have to teach towards these boys. You have to be hands on. You have to let them get up, right? Like just a
To
lecture.
remember what it was like to be a boy.
Dude, yeah, I
Yeah.
was there too. You fall
Yeah.
asleep in lecture, so I know not to do that. Um, on top of I keep an open classroom style. So I want them commenting and asking questions. The more that they're engaged, the more they're interested and they're not doing something else. So how do you bring up that engagement? You make it a competition for these kids against each other. You are, incentivizing a lot of things. You have to get, really pushing them in the right ways, giving them structure, giving them discipline through accomplishments or through different hands-on skills and getting them up out of their class, out of the seat and seeing new things and doing new things that they haven't done. So
It seems like respect too. Like, I mean, a lot of times when you're in these situations as a student, that feels like, okay, I have to respect the teacher. The teacher doesn't have to respect me. So this is going to go, power and
like a
I'm down
big
here.
ego trip, right?
Right. But if you come with your mutual respect, yeah, if like, hey, I'll respect you guys. You guys respect me. I know I know that maybe this isn't the thing y'all want to learn them, but I have to do that. Like, we got to get through this. So let's just get through it together and bounce. Yeah.
Yeah. And knowing again, too, what you're doing for them is going to make them better. What it's out of only concern and care that they're going to be better students or they're going to be better, interns and things like that.
That's true. Great point. We have a recurring segment that we do here called "How Can I Be Better To," where I ask my guest, how can I, as the general just Joe Blow, be better to, the health service coordinator or the athletic trainer at Saints. But I kind of want to put a little spin on this one because I feel like this might be maybe a better way to do this. If I'm a parent of a student, how can I be better to my athletic trainer or my health services coordinator at the school?
Lots of coffee every day. Just bring in some caffeine. Give us treats, man.
Okay.
Yeah, take care of your AT.
I like that. I like that.
Um, man, paperwork, turning that in on time.
Okay. Staying on top of stuff. I like that.
I think just communication too. It's tough too, right? We get a lot of injuries. We get a lot of kids we're managing. But usually the best outcomes are the parents that are either just shooting me an email because I'm going to take the time to respond and make sure that nothing gets missed. Or if you're calling and leaving me a voicemail. So I don't mind a parent that's a little helicoptery or whatever you want to call it, hover parent, because I know that they care. I know that we're going to cover everything and they may not get those same conversations if they don't contact me. I'm going to give them, hey, this is what you need to do or whatever, but it may not be as in depth and they may learn something, or I might hear them say something. I tell them to avoid it or just things like that.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, and so then we're gonna put heat on. And you're like, no, wait, hold on one
Yeah,
second.
don't
You're gonna
do
put
that.
ice on that. Yeah. Okay, that's smart.
Communication, if you can get in touch with them, is important. And just realize, man, they're on your side. Like they're always, an athletic trainer is always only caring about the outcomes of the kids. So if you see, all you're taking it as is, oh, this guy's not letting my kid play football, right? Why can't he play? Well, there's been probably lawsuits around this type of injury or this sport. There's probably been legislation done. There's probably been numerous medical studies. There's probably a whole course of, continuing education units that athletic trainer has taken in order to be able to give you the advice and the actual steps of why it's not going to be in the best.
But I know
A
better.
little
My
bit,
kid
yeah.
can play.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's their training. So I
Yeah.
think a lot of people may confuse athletic trainers with personal trainers as well.
Okay.
Or just maybe not the amount of knowledge or certifications that we carry. So there might be a little bit of that. So learning who this athletic trainer is and what athletic training entails is probably just the biggest one, just getting our job description out there. And that's happened really probably within the last decade, 2 decades. There's been a real big push, for advocacy for our profession and continuing that to a higher level as well.
Yeah, I think that's something that we can all do.
It may not be the outcome, right? And at the end of the day, it can't always be a win-win sometimes. If you really want that kid to play, it's not going to be good for them. The athletic trainer is going to lean to your kid because it goes back to being a pro athlete. These kids aren't going to be pro athletes. So missing a game or two is not going to change their career, right? They're going to be 99.9% of them are going to do something different.
But if their ACL never heals the right way, that could affect the rest of their life.
If there's some type of complication from a
Yeah.
high school sport, man, I've failed this kid if I did something wrong.
Right. It's almost like you got to protect people from themselves at that point, where it's like, hey, I understand you as the parent want this, but I'm protecting you from this and I'm protecting your kid from this. Like, trust me, it's not worth it.
So yeah, we're on your side. We got your back.
Nice. The end of the podcast, I kind of like to leave for my guest if they have either like a side business or side hustle that they want to promote for themselves, or if they have a friend's business or something that they want to promote, a charity, a cause, whatever it may be. Here's your time.
I don't do any of my own real personal athletic training care. If it's something that really, if you want me to look at something like my buddies and friends and stuff like that, everyone gets injured. So I really just take care of them on that level, but I haven't created that. Some athletic trainers do, and I think that could be a route eventually going into the clinical setting. But for right now, just me at Saints. And
nice.
I do, this also kind of goes back to the parents as well. So if you're a parent of a kid in San Diego area, there's the Eric Paredes Foundation. And Eric Paredes was a Steel Canyon student who suffered cardiac arrest and passed away in high school during sports.
Oh,
yeah, it was, I don't know the year offhand, but since he's passed, they've created this foundation, and what they do is they work to get AEDs into schools and more accessible AEDs throughout schools. And they also host these free cardiac assessments where you can maybe find some underlying causes of sudden cardiac arrest. And there's been students that have these abnormalities in their cardiac rhythm that have been found and detected during the screens and have had surgeries to fix it.
That's amazing.
There's a really good chance that they have saved, a lot of lives by doing that. And the screens are entirely free. This is all funded by the foundation. So um, look at that website if you have a kid.
Yeah. If you're listening right now and you're not at a place where you can look, we go to YouTube. We'll put all the links in the description so you can find the foundation right there. And yeah, support it.
The age for sudden cardiac arrest is, I think, about 15 to 25. So this is usually the younger population, and it's a serious condition that can happen. And that's why there are AEDs and trained professionals out at sports events and things like that. But yeah, that would be another one. Go get a free screening, make sure your kid's going to be okay on top of all your other doctor's appointments and checkups and things like that. Yeah.
Awesome. That's something I had no idea about. I'm sure a lot of people don't know about. So thank you. Thank you for giving us that information. That's all I had for you. Thank you again for taking the time out of your day to do this for me. I really appreciate it. And everybody go support your ADs, go support your or athletic trainers, go support your health services coordinators, bring them some coffee, treats, and such.
Anytime. Yeah, no, thank you for having me on.
Well, that's it for another episode of the Jobology podcast. And thank you, Richie, for taking time out of your busy schedule to do that for me. Before I let you guys go, a couple quick reminders as always. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and follow at Jobology Podcast on all major social media platforms. And if you guys would like to see any jobs coming up in the future, make sure you leave a comment on YouTube. And like we say to end every episode, make good choices.